So I'm Ciara Sherlock, and I am one of the co-directors and lead facilitators for the Experience Retreats, which was born out of the Psychedelic Society UK. I'm going to speak about our pioneering psilocybin-assisted retreat program in the Netherlands. I'm going to speak about what we offer and why we offer it, and as well why the ceremony study was so important to our work and why I think it's really important for this type of work in general. So I think everyone in the room here understands and is familiar with the way that psychedelics have potential to connect us to ourselves, to others, and to Earth in a profound way that can create awareness and change that I think is desperately needed in our current state of being. I think everyone here can understand that too. So our vision is to create a program that can support people with little or lots of previous psychedelic experience through a personal journey. We give specific focus to offering a holistic approach in how participants can prepare, navigate and integrate the psychedelic experience into their own lives, but in turn into wider society. So I think, integrating the psychedelic teachings and lessons into wider society is really why we do this work. So our retreat program has developed over the last 3.5+ years to facilitate more than just a psychedelic experience alone, but to facilitate deep levels of personal, social, and spiritual development. Our focus is to ensure that these experiences aren't just experiences alone, but catalysts for real inspiration and growth for people that come. I don't have much time to go through our entire retreat, but just to give a little bit of a flavour of the retreat context. It's very different to the day-to-day that our participants would be used to. They step into a container which is open-hearted, which is accepting and welcoming participants to dive deeply into themselves, to self-reflect, to process, and to embody many different parts of themselves that they may need to suppress in their regular life. They're invited, to step into a whole different state of being, a way that makes them feel they can be fully alive. So our team of currently 12 facilitators have, they each bring a real different variety of modalities to the work. So it ranges from psychotherapy, counselling, festival welfare, bodywork, meditation, shamanic practice, sound healing, and drug science. And the diversity of offerings is really important to us and what we offer as a whole, so we can be as accessible as possible to our participants that come. So there's many different modalities to get to a similar place and many different modalities to complement the psychedelic experience. So we just want to offer openings that our participants can explore if they feel connected to it or if they feel like they want to continue. So why would people come on our group retreats? Well, we get an incredible variety of different people that come, from teachers to therapists, from students to retired people. But they all come for common reasons. They all have an appetite for psychological and spiritual exploration and a curiosity for psychedelic realms. They may want to enhance their well-being or get back in touch with their emotional self. They may want to gain a sense of connectedness, or some people come in search for a whole new spiritual framing. So, in particular, giving focus to why people come on a group retreat, because I think in first thoughts, the thought of going to an unfamiliar place with 16 people for at least 4 days and taking a high dose of psilocybin is, a bit of a funny thought for people. They might feel resistant to it, which is very fair enough. But I think breaking down those barriers and allowing themselves to be nurtured through a profound experience with people that are equally as open to them seems to be actually one of the most impactful, positively impactful parts of our whole retreat in general. And it can be the most rewarding and moving part of the retreats as well, besides the psychedelic experience. So yeah, I think that sense of connectedness is missing from today's lifestyle in general, and this is why it's really important for us to really work with the group from start to finish of the retreat and further beyond the retreat too. So how do we support people on this journey is a really important topic. We tend to put massive emphasis on shamans and guides and gurus in this work for their powerful healing methods and their magical work in psychedelic spaces. I feel that this can be, in a sense, a very disempowering experience from a participant point of view. So I really believe that everyone has their own inner healer, and they have the wisdom within them to guide them on their own path and their own way. And unfortunately, in today's world, we are losing that intuitive wisdom that we have. So I think psilocybin gives us access to that inner healer on an experiential level, rather than giving the power away to someone else to tell us how to go on our path. I really see this wisdom really does come from within. When we have our sharing circles after an experience, people just come out with these golden nuggets of wisdom that only comes from their own inner world. So our job as facilitators is to create a genuinely safe and trusting container, to be a grounded presence, but not to teach or tell people directly. What is needed is selfless and skilled facilitators who compassionately support participants to explore their internal worlds that get opened up in altered states of consciousness. And the way we work, the way I see it, is we offer a compass, an orientation to our participants, not a map that they must follow. They create their own map and explore it themselves. And every map is different for every individual person. So I think there's an important point there as well on the participants' openness to interaction with the psilocybin and their trust in the facilitators. And if they have this and are comfortable in vulnerability, it allows them to go deep into their own trust and wisdom within. And if that trust is missing, I think that's where the power dynamics can come into it and become skewed, and real lessons from the medicine experience can be lost. So yeah, the use of power is a really important topic there. And this is why our work is so much about compassionately supporting people in opening up to their own inner healers, giving them a compass and giving them the space for their own journey in a safe place. And then they take away this feeling of empowerment and connection to themselves. I'll just go through some photos here as well while we're here. So how do we do this? We have, we're constantly evolving. We have some really exciting progressions and themed retreats for 2020. And we importantly want to embody the lessons that we ourselves as facilitators have learned from the psychedelic experience and different types of modalities that we have experience in, and share them throughout the retreat. So that includes nature connection, and within that locally sourced, organic, nourishing, vegan food, and a deep connection to that. Opportunity for authentic connection and personal exploration with self and others. Creative activities that bring out the inner child within us, body work practices, meditation, mindfulness work, one-to-one sessions, and with participants and sharing circles, focus on deep listening, preparation and integration, one-to-ones, And group support is really one of the most important things. I want to talk a little bit about accessible ritual and ceremony styles, because we feel like we want to offer something that feels authentic to us. We don't want to just take from other cultures, but create something that feels like our own and that feels authentic. So we want to honor tradition, but in a way we do so, that feels like it's not robbing and that it's accessible for every single person that might be very different on that retreat. So the use of ritual and ceremony is simple, and it's just for stepping into another state, another way of being, passing through into ceremony and giving that sense of rite of passage that Hannah's talked about. So another point is now we offer minimum 4-day retreats on our program. We used to offer 3, now we offer 4, 5, 6 and plus, because we're finding feedback that we were getting in the first few years of doing this work is that participants didn't feel like they had enough time, they weren't getting enough out of the integration process, which we're finding is one of the most important parts, obviously, of this experience. So we want to, it's our responsibility to fully support that process for our participants. So all woven together, this creates a container for exploration of self, others and earth, because it's what is most important to us, and we hope that our participants can take what we offer and bring it back out in order to create collective change. We have to do a little bit of expectation management as well, because psychedelics aren't the magic bullet, they aren't this transformational tool alone, and people think that sometimes when they're new to psychedelics. So I think it's important that we say that it's not just about the psychedelic experience alone. Yes, a recreational psychedelic experience can have positive effects, but the type of development work on self, others and earth that I'm referring to here requires much more awareness on how to integrate high-dose psilocybin experiences into our internal and external worlds. And it requires clear intention, suitable set and setting, and strong commitment to embody change and growth in one's life afterward. So these medicines aren't designed to fix us, but help us recognize our truth and our shadow and lead us towards steps we have to take in order to work with this stuff and nurture it and make it not so shameful, but just another part of ourselves that we want to work with. So I think if we consider the shadows of our current societal structures, it shows just how much we have to do in order to restructure our systems and ways of being, to create a place in which we can fully integrate experiences of deep connection to ourselves, to oneness, to the earth, and to others. Of course, this is a really big job, and it's not something that one person can do alone, as we know, but on our retreats, our aim is to empower people to make small adjustments and changes which contributes to a larger whole. And this is why the ceremony study was so important to us, because we know the potentials of psychedelics. They've been used for thousands of years as healing teachers. I personally have worked with more than 350 people at this point and have seen the breakthroughs that people have had. But we wanted to see the data on how our participants are actually being impacted, and what else may need to be done by us as a retreat organisation and by us as wider society to make these journeys more complete and beneficial to the whole. So that's all I need to say. Please come and speak to me afterwards. Oh, and here's pictures of our new venue that we'll be working from 2020. It's very beautiful. Where is it? It's in Holland, about almost 2 hours outside of Amsterdam. So thank you very much.
Just to give you a quick introduction why we're doing this, to the intense media coverage on the effects of psychedelics on mental health, there is a rise in expectations on what psychedelics do and the outcomes that can emerge from that. So facilitators and researchers are responsible to provide realistic expectations on potential outcomes and possibly, as much as is possible, apply empirical research to identify relevant mechanisms on how ceremonial experiences work and potentially identify associated risks and benefits. And in this framework, the Psychedelic Society provided data on the experience retreats, and on the basis of the extrapharmacological model of psychedelic drug action, we wanted to identify the role of the subjective experience, like the acute drug effects on outcome change, and what variables related to set and setting affect the subjective experiences. Apart from that, we also wanted to further investigate the subjective experience, because so far it has been under discussion that the occurrence of mystical type experiences drive positive outcomes and are predictive for positive outcomes in well-being. Apart from that, there's evidence that the occurrence of challenging experiences is associated with negative outcomes, but there is mixed data on how challenging experiences can affect long-term outcomes, and the occurrence of psychological struggle and the successful overcoming of challenging experiences can also have a positive effect on outcome change. So that's why we wanted to further investigate the role of a new construct and a new scale that is assessing this construct called emotional breakthrough. And this construct describes the successful resolution, overcoming of difficult emotive content and potential past trauma, and could be of therapeutic relevance. So you have seen this timeline before. This is the timeline of the ceremony study. We will only look at a few time points. So we will look at the measurements 2 weeks before the actual retreat. I just had to remove my hair, sorry. The pre-state measures a few hours before the retreat, where we are assessing set variables, the measurements at the day after the retreat, and the endpoint measurements 2 weeks and 4 weeks after the psychedelic experience retreats. What we were expecting was that psychological well-being will be increased at 2 and 4 weeks after the experience retreats. Furthermore, that the quality of the acute subjective experience will affect well-being changes, and that set and setting factors will affect the acute subjective experience. Furthermore, we were also interested in the social components that arise through ceremonial settings, and how do social perceptual experiences affect outcome change. So we were further predicting that variables related to connectedness, speaking nature-relatedness, social connectedness, and interpersonal tolerance would be increased 4 weeks after the experience retreats, and that the positive social experiences during the retreat itself would also affect the changes in these variables. So there come to the results. These numbers represent the sample size, so we can see 90 participants filled out the questionnaires at baseline, and the last number is the most important number. There's a key endpoint measure at 4 weeks after, so we can also see there is like an attrition bias, so people drop out. We don't necessarily know why they drop out. Maybe it's annoying to fill out the questionnaires, or to whatever reasons. The substance that's getting used in the experience retreats is psychedelic truffles, and participants can also choose if they want to take a higher dose than the standard dose or a lower dose. So we also assess this, and if we look at the demographics, we can see that participants were kind of higher middle-aged, fairly highly educated, and the sample was mainly from the UK, but also from the USA and quite distributed all over from Europe. And there's also a sample bias in that sense that 90% of the participants were of white ethnicity, and also 20 participants had a lifetime psychotic diagnosis. And the most common diagnoses were major depressive disorder and anxiety disorders. And also around 50% of the participants were psychedelic naives, meaning they never had a psychedelic experience before, and they have their first experience within the retreats, what makes the sample also a little bit special. So we used a well-validated scale on well-being to assess the changes in well-being, and we could see that compared to baseline, meaning before the experience retreat took place, we could see an increase in well-being 2 weeks post-retreat and 4 weeks post-retreat with a kind of moderate effect size. And further, we collected the variables related to connectedness, speaking about social connectedness, nature relatedness, and interpersonal tolerance. And also in these variables, we found a significant increase compared to baseline in all of these variables. Yeah, and then we also assessed the subjective effects that were occurring during the retreats itself. So we assessed the occurrence of mystical type experiences and could see that almost 60% of the participants had a full mystical experience that's describing a transcendental experience of unity and oneness. Furthermore, we collected data on the occurrence of challenging experiences. And as I said before, there's this paradox around challenging experiences. They're usually associated with negative outcomes, but can potentially also promote positive outcomes. That's why we included the emotional breakthrough inventory to assess the successful resolution of difficult emotive content and potentially trauma. Furthermore, as you've heard before, we included communitas, a scale on that measured the content type of shared humanity that can be experienced during these retreat settings. Yeah. 5 minutes. Oh, right. That went quick. So, just to see how did the occurrence of these subjective experiences affect outcome change, we can see here that mystical type experiences were predictive for the short-term changes in well-being, meaning 2 weeks after the retreat, whereas emotional breakthrough was predictive for the longer-term changes 4 weeks after the retreat. Additionally, we could see that mystical experience and communitas was predictive for the changes in nature relatedness, social connectedness, and not interpersonal tolerance. So we can draw the conclusion that mystical experiences drive short-term changes in well-being, emotional breakthrough, long-term changes in well-being. This might imply that the resolution of difficult emotive content and trauma could take longer to process, and it could take longer to re-establish this in your own identity and go on with your daily life and integrate this experience. Furthermore, we could also see that mystical type experiences and communitas were driving the changes in the connectedness measurements. Yeah, this is just an intercorrelation matrix of the challenging experience questionnaire, mystical experience questionnaire with the emotional breakthrough. And here we can see nicely that the EBI correlates with all the subscales from the mystical experience questionnaire, but also with the subscale grief from the challenging experience questionnaire, which is kind of supporting this idea that the successful resolution of psychological struggle can have positive effects and of therapeutic relevance. Further, we wanted to look at the setting, and we had this one item included: how conducive or supportive to your intentions was the environment. And here we could see most of the participants are distributed between 80 and 100. So most of the participants rated high on conduciveness of the environment, and the conduciveness of the environment was also associated with the occurrence of mystical type experiences and emotional breakthrough. So to further assess the elements of set and setting, we included the psychedelic predictor scale with the subscales clear intentions, rapport, and preparedness, assessing how prepared did the participants feel for the upcoming experience and how comfortable kind of they felt with the environment, with their co-retreaters and the facilitators. And we also included measurements on the setting elements and to what extent these setting elements affected the overall experience. So things like the presence of emotionally supportive individuals, live singing, the presence of music, or disruptions or perceived threats during a retreat. I tried to wrap this up quickly. So we calculated multivariate regression models, and we could see that from the set perspective, having a therapeutic intention was predictive for the extent to which mystical type experiences occurred. The feeling of preparedness was negatively predictive for the occurrence of challenging experiences, meaning that the more prepared you are, the less likely you will experience challenging experiences. And rapport was predictive for the extent to which communitas occurred emotional breakthrough and mystical experiences. There was one slide. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the wrong direction. So we further looked at the setting elements, and we could see that the presence of music was predictive for mystical type experiences, communitas and supportive individuals was predictive for mystical experiences, emotional breakthrough, and communitas. So wrapping this up, we can see that these set and setting variables affected the acute experience, and furthermore, these distinct acute experience, emotional breakthrough, mystical type experience were predictive for the changes in well-being, and the extent of communitas was predictive for the changes in the connectedness related variables, speaking of social connectedness and nature relatedness. So to draw a summary on this, we could see that the emotional breakthrough inventory could act as a potential measure of therapeutic relevance, and that the resolution of difficult emotive content and trauma can be therapeutic and beneficial, and also that there is quite a huge importance of preparedness and the extent to what you experience emotional support from other individuals during a retreat. And just to talk about limitations of these kind of studies, they're observational, prospective, questionnaire-based studies. And for example, one problem is the big attrition bias, that people drop out. We don't really know why they drop out. It could either be they have adverse effects, we can't assess them, or they just don't want to fill out the questionnaires anymore. So we're working on strategies on how to improve this and to keep participants engaged as much as possible to really draw a really realistic picture on how experience retreats works. And just to kick off this for the later discussion we have, we're also interested in what is stabilizing these positive long-term outcomes. What can we do in terms of integration and aftercare? And not only what facilitators can do in that sense, but what we as a community can do. Just to keep this in mind, and maybe I invite you to actively engage in the discussion later, share your thoughts on what integration is, on what your experience with it is. Okay.